ancient rock art featuring images of what looks like UFOs, entities with antenna and space helmets? Are these just images from the imaginations of our early ancestors, or were they documenting things they actually saw? And if so, where did these strange entities come from? What you're looking at here is rock art found in Sego Canyon in Utah. Some of this stuff looks very interesting. These petroglyphs, some more than 8,000 years old, feature these mysterious figures with large, hollow eyes and often no arms or legs. Some even look like they have antennas. To fans of the ancient astronaut theory, this looks like possible evidence that extraterrestrials came to Earth long ago. One of the most famous images is known as the Barrier Canyon Holy Man. This one is very eerie. I mean, just what is this thing that the smaller, dark figures are surrounding? Is it meant to be a god, or could it be a depiction of something they really saw, something from another world? Well, researcher Polly Shavsma thinks that these figures were probably created as part of shamanic rituals, not encounters with aliens. That the figures with strange eyes and legless bodies might represent spirit beings or supernatural entities that shamans, spiritual leaders of the time, claimed to have contacted during trance-like states. According to Shavsma, shamans often believed they could travel to other realms using hallucinogens to connect with these divine beings for guidance. What exactly are these figures wearing on their heads? Some say they look a lot like helmets. These figures are part of the Val Camonica petroglyphs in Italy. They're often mentioned when the concept of ancient alien astronauts is brought up. You know, because isn't everyone talking about this stuff all the time? These petroglyphs, which date back over 10,000 years, show a variety of different images. Some of them are pretty standard stuff, animals, symbols, godlike entities, but some of them, especially the two astronaut-looking guys, look way more sci-fi than anything you could expect from ancient humans. So did these ancient humans record encounters with extraterrestrials, or are we just seeing what we want to see? At the end of the day, we can never really know for sure unless we somehow manage to invent time travel, which I really hope we do. In the tribal Bastar region of Chhattisgarh, India, a set of ancient rock paintings were rediscovered in 2014, and they're pretty crazy looking. Discovered near the town of Charama, the paintings date back about 10,000 years, and archaeologist J.R. Bhagat was immediately fascinated by how much of them seemed to look like aliens and UFOs, and I definitely see it. Some seem to show humanoid figures with antennae descending from the sky, others seem to be flying in disc-shaped crafts with the 3 legs coming out from the bottom. In a few images, the figures are shown wearing what appear to be spacesuits. Now, Bhagat was pretty much full on with the alien stuff. He actually made it pretty clear that he thought there was a very good chance these paintings represented ancient humans' encounters with extraterrestrials, or at least their imagination of alien beings from out in the stars. Locals from the area also have legends of ancient beings known as the Rohela people, which translates to the small-sized ones, and they have stories of these entities landing in flying machines, abducting villagers and taking them away, never to be seen again. Could these rock paintings be depicting those very same sky visitors, or are these images just products of the artist's imaginations? The Wandjina cave paintings of the Kimberley region in Australia have fascinated people for centuries. These paintings show figures with these large black eyes, white faces, and no mouths, often surrounded by halos or what sorta look like helmets. They're unlike anything we'd expect to see in Aboriginal art, which has led to this theory that these could be depictions of alien beings. Now, the Wandjina are considered powerful spirit beings in Australian Aboriginal culture, believed to have come from the sky during the dream time. They're said to have created the land and its people before disappearing into the earth or returning back to the stars. But it's really hard to look at these images here and not see your stereotypical alien, isn't it? Why are they painted this way? Could these ancient beings really have been extraterrestrial visitors? In the heart of the Sahara, there is a place called the Tassili Najer, a massive sandstone plateau in southern Algeria. First of all, the landscape just looks otherworldly. It looks like another planet, which makes some of the rock art even stranger. The rock art, which includes about 15,000 paintings and carvings, is considered one of the richest archaeological sites in the entire world. The most famous part of the Tassili rock art is from what's called the Round Head period, which dates back around 6,000 to 8,000 years, and these images, they're definitely out there. The figures painted on the rocks have big round heads, no real facial features, and some even have strange, almost alien looking features like this one here with the elongated head. Another famous image, known as the God of Safar, almost looks like a humanoid wearing some sort of strange suit. And some of the other figures look like they're wearing diving helmets or spacesuits. Of course, others argue that these could just be representations of ritualistic masks or ceremonial dresses from ancient times. Whatever they are though, these paintings give us an incredible look into the life in the Sahara thousands of years ago. The Cocknos stone is a massive 42-foot by 26-foot stone in West Dunbartonshire, Scotland, covered in strange, grooved spirals, geometric shapes, and over 90 mysterious cup and ring carvings. The markings are believed to date back around 5,000 years, making the stone one of the finest examples of Bronze Age rock art in Europe. It was discovered by Reverend James Harvey in 1887. What makes the Cocknos stone so intriguing is not just the sheer number of carvings on it, but some of the odd features like the pre-Christian cross, 2 pairs of carved footprints, each with only 4 toes. Why only 4 toes? Could this be a symbol, or could it mean some kind of otherworldly influence? In the 60s, the stone was repeatedly damaged by vandals, so in 1964, archaeologists decided to cover it up to protect it. The stone was buried for decades, but about 8 years ago, it started being unearthed again. And this unearthing, of course, brought a lot of attention to the mysterious carvings once again. Some theorists, especially those into the ancient astronaut idea, think these carvings could be evidence of alien visitors from the past. The weird shapes, the footprints, is it just ancient art, or could it be something more? In the Talampaya National Park in Argentina, there's a mysterious collection of ancient petroglyphs carved into some of the rock faces. The petroglyphs date back thousands of years, with some estimates putting them around 2,000 to 3,000 years old. I mean, does this not look a bit like a person in a spacesuit to you? I mean, it's very rudimentary, but I could see it. Some of the figures also have large round heads with long, thin bodies and arms. Others have bizarre elongated faces or oversized eyes. It could just be stylistic, of course, but it's easy to see why some people say these might be representations of ancient encounters with something from beyond. The Geoglyphs rock is this massive boulder in the mountains of North Carolina, full of some of the most intriguing sets of petroglyphs in the United States. The rock itself is covered in over 1,500 symbols, including cut marks, spirals, tracks, and what some believe to be winged shapes and claw-like imprints. But what do these designs actually mean? Some think the petroglyphs may represent a map of the surrounding landscape, showing hunting trails, rivers, and landmarks that were important to the Cherokee people. The Cherokee also have their own legends connected to the rock, including stories of Judakula, a mythical creature described as this slant-eyed master of game. The rock is considered spiritually significant to the Cherokee, and it was part of an old trail connecting sacred sites. With more than 1,500 carvings, Judakula rock holds more petroglyphs than any other site east of the Mississippi. Its true meaning is still a bit of a mystery, but it is clear that the ancient site was extremely important culturally and spiritually. So we're going to go back to Sego Canyon for a moment to talk more specifically about the rock art created by the Fremont people. Sego County is a bit of a time capsule, with rock art from 4 different periods: Archaic, Fremont, Ute, and even some Anglo-American additions from the late 1800s. The Fremont style dates back around 600 to 1250 CE. It features these human-like figures that are pecked directly into the rock, and they're very strange looking figures. To me, some of them almost look like your classic 1950s style robots. Very boxy bodies, what almost looks like antennas sticking out of their heads, details that look kind of like buttons and knobs on their bodies. Again, could these figures represent something more than just ancient people? Could they be alien visitors or their technology? By the time the Ute style started coming about, around 1300 to the mid 1800s, the art had evolved to include more realistic depictions of animals, shields, and warriors, more standard stuff. And then of course we see the addition of graffiti by settlers and miners in the 19th century. In the hills of Galicia, Spain, there's a fascinating collection of ancient rock art known as the Galician spirals, found on rocks scattered across the region that date back thousands of years, with some estimates putting them at over 4,000 years old. The spirals are pretty interesting because of their unusual-ish design. They're typically circular or spiral shapes, sometimes intertwined with other patterns like zigzags or concentric rings. Spirals are often interpreted as symbolic representations of ancient religious or spiritual beliefs at the time. Some researchers think they could be connected to the sun, cycles of nature, or fertility, but what's interesting is how these shapes resemble motifs found in other ancient cultures from Europe to South America. Some people believe these spirals might actually depict something more extraordinary, like alien encounters. The idea is that the spirals, with their complex swirling shapes, could be taken from symbols on alien visitors' spacecraft. And, you know, I could see that because of how similar these are across the world. Is this stuff humans were seeing everywhere? I mean, they had no contact with each other at the time. Or it could just be something we intrinsically draw. We just like doing those shapes, you know? Take your pick. But
definitive proof of life beyond our planet found inside of a meteorite that landed in Sri Lanka back in December of 2013. Yeah. When pieces of the space rock were gathered and examined back in 2013, a shocking discovery was made. The debris of the meteor contained fossils, algae fossils, of clear extraterrestrial origin, according to lead scientist Professor Chandra Wickramasinghe. Because algae is technically alive, if Professor Chandra's science is correct, the discovery marks the first documented discovery of life that originated from outside of our atmosphere. While the legitimacy of the work has been debated amongst Chandra's peers, who claim that the algae may have been embedded into the meteorite during its time on Earth, the professor is standing firm in his discovery and has claimed that among the algae fossils he discovered were other organisms that are not yet identified and do not match anything discovered on Earth thus far, which of course is great news for those of us who are really hoping that Chandra's discovery of extraterrestrial life is legitimate and that the doubters are just mad they weren't able to make the discovery for themselves.
Are these sculptures of planes? They kind of look like stylized planes to me, but that would be impossible because these are thousands of years old. They're artifacts from what is known as the Kumbaya period, a pre-Columbian culture which was around from about 500 BC to 600 AD. They were known for their skill in metalwork. I mean, obviously these things are lovely, but yeah, they really do look remarkably like modern airplanes. They have wings that don't really look like bird wings to me, and a lot of them even have what look like tail fins. So how and why were these created? Did these people somehow have knowledge of what the future of air travel was going to look like? Were they encountering beings with highly advanced technology? The official explanation is that these are depictions of animals, you know, insects, birds, that sort of thing, and yeah, there's a very good chance that's all these are, but I can't deny how eerily accurate they look to modern flying machines. And here's another really interesting thing. In 1994, a group of German engineers actually built scale models of the Kumbaya artifacts to see if they could fly, and guess what? They did, with an added propulsion system of course, but the designs worked. They were aerodynamically perfect and could fly.
The Williams Enigmalith. What is it? Well, I'm not entirely sure, but it's definitely from out of this world. It looks a bit like a rock with a plug, but it's not a rock with a plug, and it's far from being just an ordinary rock. The object was found in 1998 by a hiker named John J. Williams. He noticed a strange piece of metal coming out of the dirt on his hiking trail, and so he dug it up. When he did, he revealed a rock with 3 metal prongs sticking out of it. It looked somehow man-made and appeared appeared to have some kind of electrical component to it. Why? Well, I'm not sure. But Williams, who is an electrical engineer, claims that the electronic component embedded in the stone was not glued or welded into the granite rock surrounding it, meaning that while it appears to have possibly been man-made, because electrical components don't just naturally exist inside of rocks, especially ones dated to be around 100,000 years old, it must be something else, perhaps from somewhere else, perhaps somewhere out of this world. While Williams is open to having others research the strange rock, he does have a few conditions. He must be present for whatever discovery is made, and the rock must remain unharmed. Even with these parameters, you would think that by using modern-day tools and technology, we would have been able to get an answer as to what exactly the rock is by now, and where the electrical component is coming from and how it was embedded. But no such discovery has been made, leaving the leading theory to be that its origins are likely not of this earth, and that it likely holds the answers to questions we haven't even thought to ask yet.
No one is exactly sure what this thing is. It's been dubbed the Wedge of Aiud and was found in Romania in 1973. Workers came across it while digging during a construction project. It was found buried along with two large mastodon bones. The wedge is around 5 pounds and it's made of aluminum. Now, this turns out to be pretty strange because aluminum wasn't widely used until the 19th century, but this thing is estimated to be much older, at least 250,000 years old. It's a very odd looking object. It looks like a modern art piece or something, but what exactly is it? Well, again, nobody really knows for sure, but one of the funnest theories, of course, is that it's extraterrestrial in origin, maybe having come off an ancient alien spacecraft or something.
The Sumerian Triumph Tapestry, which appears to not only depict the succession of various rulers to the throne, but also the presence of UFOs hovering above the Sumerian people, is next on our list today. The tapestry was created in the capital of West Flanders province in the Flemish region of Belgium around 1538, and since then it has been the subject of many conspiracy theories, which makes sense considering the two alien spaceship-looking objects depicted in the top left corner of the piece. Now, if you know anything about the Sumerian people or the Anunnaki, you are likely well aware that even without the presence of the Triumph Tapestry, the Sumerians are a pretty good argument for the legitimacy of aliens having had a pretty prominent presence on Earth in the past. Adding the tapestry into the mix is really just the cherry on top of the extraterrestrial cake, because it confirms how the Anunnaki, the ultra-intelligent alien species that ordered the creation of the pyramids, arrived on Earth in the first place. If you don't know anything about the Sumerians, ancient Sumeria, and the Anunnaki, but would like to, I do have a video on them titled Ancient Sumerian Mysteries That May Never Be Explained that you can watch after this.
Next, we have the Casso artifact, known as one of the world's out-of-place artifacts. It was discovered in 1961 near Olancha, California. While out looking for geodes, these rock collectors found a strange rock that seemed out of place, and when they cut it open, they were surprised to find it actually had a metal core inside. The outer layer of the rock was encrusted with a hard substance, while the inner metal core was a cylindrical object that looked almost like a spark plug. This was not what anyone had been expecting to find, because the rock seemed to be millions of years old, far older than the age of modern machinery. So it sparked, see what I did there? It sparked a lot of curiosity. Some researchers think this is just a naturally occurring geode that somehow formed around a modern spark plug, but what if it's not the case? What if it's a piece of ancient technology left by an advanced civilization, or even more interesting, an object that some extraterrestrial beings left behind a long time ago?
I'm sure by now we've all heard the theories that the pyramids were built by aliens, which is a fair assumption considering the fact that historians have been consistently unable to come up with an explanation as to how the construction of the pyramids would have been possible in ancient times. But what about other massive artifacts like Stonehenge, or perhaps the massive stone head that was found in the middle of the Guatemalan jungle in the 1930s? The statue dates back to before the Spanish Revolution, so prior to the Mayan and Aztec empires, empires falling to the Spanish armies, which is strange considering 1. There is little to no way the Mayans living in the area could have sculpted the stone head and placed it in the area, and 2. If somehow they did, why doesn't it look like them? The statue's features do not mimic those of the ancient Mayans or Aztecs. Because of this, it is believed that the features once displayed on the head, which have since worn down due to revolutionary troops using the historic artifact as target practice, were actually the features of an ancient alien civilization that was far more intelligent than humanity, and that likely had a hand in the construction of the Mayan and perhaps even the Aztec empires as well.
This next one is actually 100% known to be from space. Back in June of last year, Harvard professor and theoretical astrophysicist Avi Loeb led an excavation to Papua New Guinea to uncover the remnants of a meteor that had crashed into the Pacific Ocean, and what they found were small spherical space rocks from deep in space, and there's still a question as to whether the object they came from was naturally occurring or not. What they do know is that the small spheres are made up of elements we don't have here on Earth. Loeb wrote, quote, "This is a historic discovery because it represents the first time that humans put their hands on materials from a large object that arrived to Earth from outside the solar system."
Finally, we have an incredibly mysterious extraterrestrial object discovered by the Betts family in 1974. That year, a mysterious fire had broken out on the family's property that destroyed 88 acres of woodland. When the Bettses went out to explore the area and search for the cause of the mysterious fire, they stumbled across a metal sphere with a diameter of just 8 inches and a weight of almost 20 pounds. At first, the family thought that the object might have belonged to the Soviet Union or perhaps NASA. They thought about leaving it where they found it, but curiosity got the better of them, and so they decided to take it home. About 2 weeks later, the family's son was playing guitar while sitting next to the strange spherical object when all of a sudden it began to emit a strange resonating sound that caused the family dog to act up. A while later, the family discovered that when they pushed the sphere across the floor away from themselves, it would change direction and return to the person who had pushed it. Not only that, but the object avoided being damaged at all costs, rolling up slanted tables to keep itself from crashing on the floor, and eventually it began emitting pulsing sounds seemingly out of nowhere. The strange behavior was witnessed by scientists as well as representatives from the military, so you don't just have to take the Betts family's word for it. At first, the Betts family refused to let the ball out of their possession, but after doors started slamming shut and music began randomly playing in their home, they handed it over to the authorities, who were shocked to discover that the metal ball was just that, a metal ball, or so it appeared. While there is no solid explanation as to why the sphere displayed such strange properties and caused so many strange things to happen, I think we can all agree that the most likely reason is because it came from outer space with a purpose that has yet to reveal itself to mankind.
At the time of this recording, NASA has just launched a craft the other day set to head to Jupiter's moon to discover if life exists there. On October 14th, NASA launched the Europa Clipper spacecraft on a mission to explore Jupiter's moon, Europa, which scientists believe might have conditions suitable for life. The spacecraft lifted off from Kennedy Space Center in Florida on a SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket. This mission aims to investigate Europa's subsurface ocean, hidden beneath an ice shell that could be up to 25 kilometers thick. Europa is about a quarter of the size of Earth, but it's believed to contain twice as much water as all of Earth's oceans combined. This makes it one of the most promising locations for finding potential life out in space, at least that we know of. The Europa Clipper is the largest spacecraft ever built for a planetary mission. It's about 100 feet long, equipped with 9 scientific instruments designed to measure the internal ocean and analyze the composition of the moon's surface. The spacecraft will conduct 49 close flybys of Europa starting in 2031, getting as close as 15.5 miles to the surface. So unfortunately, we do have quite a while to wait before we hear anything, but the fact that NASA is actively seeking out life on a distant moon is pretty cool. Fingers crossed they find something. Just last year, NASA released a highly anticipated 36-page report on UFOs, or UAPs, and there were some interesting takeaways. They looked into hundreds of sightings but concluded that they didn't find any solid evidence that aliens were behind any of them. Still, they didn't completely rule out the possibility either. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson made it clear that the agency is stepping up its game in researching these mysterious encounters. He said they'll be using better tech and artificial intelligence to dig deeper into them. The report is pretty technical, but one key takeaway is that it stated there is no reason to conclude extraterrestrial sources are responsible for these sightings. But the report also didn't deny the possibility of, quote, potential unknown alien technology operating in Earth's atmosphere. So that's pretty cool. Nicola Fox, who's part of NASA's Science Mission Directorate, said UAPs are still one of our planet's biggest mysteries. The challenge? A lot of the data they have just isn't good enough to draw any solid conclusions about what these sightings really are. To tackle this, NASA brought in a new director of UAP research, but they're keeping their identity a secret. This person will build a database to track and analyze future sightings, and using AI and machine learning. It's a smart move, especially since Dr. Daniel Evans mentioned that some members of the UAP panel had faced, quote, actual threats, which is unsettling. So keeping the new director's identity hidden is really about protecting their safety. The Falcon Lake incident began on May 20th, 1967 in Falcon Lake, Manitoba, Canada. This event has often been called Canada's best documented UFO case, and for good reason. It all started with Stephen McCallick, an industrial mechanic and amateur geologist. He was exploring the area in search of precious metals when he suddenly heard a commotion from a flock of geese, and he looked up to see two strange objects hovering about 150 feet away, which he described as cigarette-shaped things with humps in the middle, glowing with a reddish hue. One of the crafts then landed on a nearby rocky platform, transforming into a shiny disc that looked like, quote, hot stainless steel. McCallick sketched the craft for about a half an hour before deciding that he wanted to get a closer look. As he approached, he noticed it was completely smooth, but the craft had an open door where he could hear muffled voices. Then he reached out and touched the craft, which was so hot it melted the fingertips of his gloves. As he turned to leave, understandably, a panel then opened up, releasing a blast of heated gas that knocked him back, setting his clothes on fire. McCallick barely managed to escape, feeling nauseous and disoriented. He was so sick he was unable to eat solid food in the days following the incident, and was treated for burns that doctors said resembled radiation injuries. His story caught the attention of the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Air Force, and even US authorities. And when they reached the site that McCallick said he spotted the craft, authorities found a 15-foot ring of burnt vegetation, and there were highly radioactive elements found in soil samples and in the clothing McCallick had been wearing on the day of the encounter, which he had to rip off because they were on fire. And there was also superheated metal that had melted into the cracks of rocks, also highly radioactive. Till this day, the case has not been explained. This incident is referred to as South Africa's Roswell, the Kalahari crash. Kind of tells you how significant this one was. So the story goes that this whole incident was covered up. Some of the details of this one are a bit vague, and some chalk this up to being a hoax, but there were supposed leaked documents describing the following events. So this was an unusual event that took place over the Indian Ocean on May 7th, 1989. According to reports, a fast-moving object believed to be a UFO was spotted by naval personnel. In response, fighter jets were sent to intercept and target it. The UFO was successfully hit and crashed in the Kalahari Desert, leaving a noticeable skid mark. Shortly after the crash, a US recovery team was swiftly deployed to gather evidence from the site and transport it to Patterson Air Force Base. And not only were parts of the aircraft retrieved, but the bodies of two alien beings as well. The Tic Tac UFO incident is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence in the world of unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs. On November 14th of 2004, retired Navy Commander David Fravor, a pilot with the USS Nimitz, had an encounter during a training exercise off the coast of Southern California. Fravor was flying with Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich when they were directed to investigate an unusual radar signal detected by the USS Princeton, another ship in their strike group. The radar operators had spotted, quote, multiple anomalous aerial vehicles that descended from 80,000 feet to sea level in less than a second. Fravor and Dietrich diverted to get a closer look, and as they approached, Fravor described seeing a small white object that looked almost like a tic-tac, hovering above the ocean waves. He recalled in a 2021 interview that the object seemed to respond to their movements, as if it was aware that they were there. The tic-tac was about the size of Fravor's jet, but had no visible markings, no wings or exhaust plumes. He attempted to cut it off, but the object accelerated away so quickly that it vanished from sight, only to be detected 60 miles away in less than a minute. Fravor stated, "I think what we experienced was well beyond the material science and the capabilities that we had at the time, that we have currently, or that we're going to have in the next 10 to 20 years. This incident came out in a report revealing over 500 sightings since 2004, some of which, including this one, are still unexplained. The 1952 Washington, D.C. UFO incident, often referred to as the Washington Flap, is one of the craziest UFO reports in history. Over 2 weekends in July of that year, people in the Capitol began reporting a series of strange sightings in the sky. On the night of July 19th, radar operators at Washington National Airport picked up a cluster of unknown objects flying at incredible speeds. Ground witnesses described seeing bright lights darting around erratically. The following night, the sightings continued, and the U.S. Air Force sent up fighter jets to chase the mysterious objects. Pilots in the jets reported seeing glowing lights that seemed to defy the laws of physics, making sudden accelerations and sharp turns that no conventional aircraft could replicate. Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was an investigator for Project Blue Book in the 50s. In 2013, during a citizen hearing on disclosure, he told a pretty wild story. While working for Project Blue Book, his job had often just involved debunking UFO sightings, but there was one incident that he had no explanation for. French recounted an incident had happened while he was investigating off the coast of St. John's, Newfoundland. Reports had come in about 2 mysterious aircraft that supposedly crashed in the water. French followed a group of around 100 onlookers gathered on a nearby wharf. What he saw next was something he'd never be able to forget. He described encountering 2 to 3 foot tall beings that were thin and gray, seemingly working on their damaged crafts in the water. French and the onlookers watched as these strange beings repaired their vessels right before his eyes. Then the craft lifted out of the water and shot off into the sky. He never included this sighting in his official reports at the time, probably fearing he'd be laughed out of his job. The Indian Ocean has a long history of mysterious sightings, with reports of strange underwater objects dating back as far as 1873. A number of sailors have described encounters with these massive, mile-wide discs lurking beneath the surface of the water, sometimes accompanied by eerie lights. One of the earliest documented sightings occurred on March 23, 1873, when the ship Adelheid was navigating the South China Sea. Crew members claimed to see this huge glowing circular object floating just below the water. And then, May 15, 1879, the crew of the HMS Vulture spotted 2 enormous Ferris wheel type objects spinning in opposite directions. Each spoke about 25 feet wide and spaced about 100 feet apart. On April 14, 1901, sailors aboard the SS Kilwa reported beams of light shining from an underwater disc-like object in the Persian Gulf. Then in 1943, a sailor named Matthew Mangle noticed a massive glowing disc keeping pace with his ship. Next on the list, we have the Rendlesham Forest incident. This one is very well documented. It took place in December of 1980 near the Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, England. Late at night on December 26th of 1980, military personnel witnessed strange lights descending into the forest. At first they figured it was just a downed aircraft, a known one. What they found definitely seemed to be an aircraft, just not one they'd ever seen before. They came across what seemed to be a metallic object on the forest floor and would see strange lights in the sky. Some reported that the object they saw was triangular and emitted strange beams of light. One of the airmen even claimed to have touched the object. There are official documents that have been released about this story with full reports by the military personnel at the site, and what they described was pretty strange. Now, did they actually encounter an alien spacecraft? It's debatable, but what is clear is that they saw something out of the ordinary. And finally, we have one of the most mysterious and destructive crash landings of all time, the Tunguska event. On June 30th, 1908, a massive blast hit this remote area of Russia. The event is believed to have been caused by the airburst of a large object of some kind, most likely a comet or asteroid, entering Earth's atmosphere and exploding in mid-air. The explosion released an enormous amount of energy and flattened about 80 million trees in the area. Now, luckily this happened in a very remote area, so only trees were affected, but that also means there were very few witnesses. A handful of people did report seeing a bright bluish light in the sky though, accompanied by a series of thunderous noises. And there's always been this question as to whether this was caused by a space rock or something else. Apparently there was also mutated plant life after this impact, and Joseph Stalin is rumored to have even conducted secret experiments in the area, but that's more of an urban legend. Let's kick things off with one of the most mind-bending reasons why NASA may be hesitant to fully explore the deep sea: the potential for extraterrestrial life. Now, what exactly do I mean by this specifically? Well, here's the thing. NASA believes that a lot of Earth's oceans actually came from asteroids that crashed into our planet billions of years ago. How do they know this? Well, the chemical composition of ocean water is quite similar to some of the oldest meteorites in the solar system, so it's plausible that the water we're swimming in now was delivered to us by asteroids billions of years ago. But it gets stranger. When these space rocks collided with Earth, they didn't just bring water, they also brought organic material that's been evolving in our oceans ever since. These materials might even be part of what gave rise to life on Earth. Now, maybe this is a stretch, but what if some of that organic material has continued to evolve in ways we're not ready for? With 95% of our oceans still unexplored, it's possible that we're not alone down there. There could be life forms lurking in the deep that have been evolving in isolation for millions of years, and NASA might want to keep that under wraps. Now let's get into the really spooky stuff. According to some rumors, NASA's 2022 Orpheus expedition may have encountered something in the deep sea, something they may not be willing to share. The mission, which was supposed to study the ocean depths for insights into space exploration, was actually looking in the Hadal Zone, the deepest area of the ocean, but some insiders believe that the team stumbled on something unsettling. A species of massive, never-before-seen marine life that could be hiding in the most extreme depths of the Earth. The story goes that the submersible spotted a creature so huge that one of the astronauts, Garrett Reisman, described its eye as being as big as a flying saucer. This next one's pretty explosive. An underwater volcano located off the coast of Tonga. It made headlines on January 15th of 2022 with an eruption so massive it sent shockwaves around the globe. The explosion was equivalent to 15 million tons of TNT, making it one of the most powerful volcanic events ever recorded. I mean, just look at this. It doesn't look real. It looks like Zeus's wrath on the Earth. This eruption didn't just blow a ton of steam into the air, it actually reshaped the ocean floor too. The area around the volcano was altered, creating a massive cavern that reaches down about 850 meters, or about 2,788 feet down into the Earth's crust. If it continues to deepen, we could be looking at some serious geological consequences. Now, NASA and other scientific organizations monitor volcanic activity pretty closely, but there's probably a good reason why they don't rush into these hot zones. The unpredictability of underwater volcanoes makes them extremely dangerous, and they could potentially trigger devastating events like tsunamis or earthquakes. Next up, let's talk about eddies, kind of like the ocean's version of black holes. Now, we all know black holes in space are terrifying, but did you know that the deep sea has something equally creepy? What you're looking at here is a massive eddy photographed with a NASA satellite back in 2011 off the coast of South Africa. Not something you'd want to get caught up in. Eddies are massive circular currents that can swallow up pretty much everything in their path. And they're not just tiny whirlpools either. I mean, some of them are pretty small, but others, as you've just seen, can get so big you can see them from space. And once you're caught in one like that, there's no escaping. These currents can last for hours, days, or even weeks. Unlike black holes, which might theoretically transport you to another dimension, and Eddie's pull is much simpler. He just gets sucked in and you drown. Now, NASA has investigated the deep sea to understand extreme environments, which also helps them prepare for deep space exploration. But here's where things get strange. There have been stories circulating about intelligent cephalopods in the ocean's depths. These creatures are said to have sabotaged equipment and even interacted with the submersibles exploring their territory. Now, is this all just internet rumor? I mean, some of it maybe, but cephalopods like squids and octopuses are known to be rather intelligent animals. Octopuses can be particularly crafty, and the fact that there are now known to be massive-sized squids lurking in the ocean, maybe they could be just as dangerous for underwater exploration as they were for ships sailing the sea back in the day, leading to legends of giant squids pulling sailors into the depths of the water, never to be seen again. Alright, back to alien life. We've all heard the conspiracy theories about UFOs, but have you heard the stories about alien bases hidden underwater? Take the Solomon Islands, for example, where locals have told stories for centuries about strange lights in the sky that disappear into the ocean. What could be going on there, I wonder? It's not just the Solomons either. There have been sightings of unidentified objects hovering over water all around the globe, including mysterious UFOs and glowing lights in places like Alaska and the Mediterranean. Some even claim that they're underwater alien bases. Now, NASA doesn't come out and confirm any of these stories, of course, but they've been involved in some strange underwater research, especially when it comes to studying deep sea environments. Could they know more than they're letting on? Maybe the deep sea is the perfect cover for whatever alien activities are going on beneath the surface. Could NASA be holding back info on alien life in our oceans? And look, it wouldn't be the first time the space agency has kept secrets. Of course, it's not just aliens and volcanoes lurking in the deep. The ocean is home to some of the scariest known creatures imaginable, many of which could pose a real threat to anyone exploring. Giant squids, great white sharks, they're more well known, but there's a whole list of lesser known creatures too, like the cookie cutter shark, for example, which can and has been known to take chomps out of ships. The deep sea is full of dangers like that, and there's always the possibility of running into something much bigger and far more dangerous than anything we've encountered so far. Think of it this way. In space, it's very unlikely you're gonna run into some dangerous form of life. I mean, deeper out, there's a higher chance for sure, but in the ocean, there are more immediate threats that we know of. Deep sea explorers have reported odd encounters with hostile creatures, and while some of them are definitely just internet folklore, others aren't. Like a case in 1978, when the USS Stein, a Navy ship's sonar equipment, was shredded by what they think was a massive-sized squid. This one is downright weird. NASA's discovery of a city of lights in the middle of the ocean where there's no land to be found. Back in 2012, NASA teamed up with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or the NOAA, to release a nighttime map of the Earth. Everything looked normal, except for one bizarre anomaly off the coast of Argentina. The map showed a strange cluster of lights in the middle of the ocean, and it looked like a city complete with patterns that almost resembled an arrowhead or even the Eiffel Tower. The only problem, there's no land in that area, so how could lights be shining there? NASA claimed these were just fishing boats probably, but could there be something bigger going on? Something that for whatever reason, NASA doesn't want us to know about. Well, it wouldn't make sense for me not to mention the triangles. And what do I mean by triangles? Well, I'm talking about areas in the ocean where weird, often terrifying things happen. We've all heard of the Bermuda Triangle, but did you know there are other ones, like the Michigan Triangle? These are locations known for bizarre incidents where ships, planes, and even entire vessels have been known to just vanish without a trace. The Bermuda Triangle is famous for incidents like the disappearance of Flight 19 in 1945, the USS Cyclops in 1918, and the mysterious vanishing of Flight DC-3 in 1948. And there are some spooky theories as to what's happening here. Could it just be dangerous weather? Sure, but others think there's something weirder, possibly, like electromagnetic interference messing with equipment. No one really knows for sure, but what is clear is that there are just too many unexplained disappearances to ignore. And finally, we've got an eerie story from the beaches of England. In 2011, 87 unexploded World War II bombs washed up on Calshot Beach. Now imagine walking along the beach and stumbling across dozens of old bombs. A 5-person bomb squad was sent in to handle the explosives. They cordoned off the area to keep people safe. The bombs were carefully stacked offshore during low tide, and when the tide came in, they were detonated. Luckily, no one was harmed, but it was a close call. Now, this is just one incident. There's still plenty of unexploded ordnance out there. The US government has even reported that 6 nuclear bombs went missing in the ocean, never to be found. NASA's aware of these potential threats, and it makes sense why they'd probably be cautious about venturing into the deep sea. The ocean could be hiding much more dangerous things. And when it comes to losing nukes in the water, yeah, I wouldn't blame them for wanting to steer clear of that.
For so long, we have looked for life in space within the parameters of what constitutes life to us: DNA, RNA, and nucleic acids. But there is a theory, the different kind of life theory, that states this is the reason why we haven't been successful in our search, because life outside of Earth does not need any of the things that we do to survive. Their cells get instructions in biochemical ways completely different from our own. Going off of this, one can assume that planets previously deemed as uninhabitable and therefore removed from the search area for extraterrestrial life might actually be the exact place where alien life forms could be found. The statement that only 1 in a million planets have the right combination of chemicals, temperature, water, days, and nights to support planetary life as we know it completely discounts planetary life as we don't. Extraterrestrials who operate on an incredibly different fundamental and chemical level than our own might be lurking right in our cosmic backyard. We just haven't been searching for them properly. The faraway theory is a pretty straightforward one. The reason we have yet to find aliens is because they are too far away and moving further away by the minute. Basically, the theory states that due to the expansion of the universe, galaxies are constantly moving further and further away from one another, and the further they become, the faster they move, which means it's highly likely that we miss that sweet spot of alien interaction due to the fact that our society was just too underdeveloped when aliens inhabited galaxies that were close enough to communicate with. Either that or humanity didn't miss it, but we did, because it already happened some 6,000 years ago, which would explain the pyramids and many ancient civilizations' fascinations with the stars. Either way, we're SOL for distance. But maybe we haven't found aliens yet because we haven't been communicating properly. Here's the thing. For the better half of a century, humanity has been leaking radio signals into space at such a rate that any intelligent life form within 100 light years of Earth would surely be able to pick up the signal. But as tech improves, these radio leaks reduce, and one day they might disappear altogether, and the Earth might fall back into radio silence. Perhaps the same is the case for other planets, and the reason we haven't been able to hear their radio signals and they haven't heard any of ours is simply because in the cosmic scope of time, the radio signals just don't last that long and our timing is off. In 1974, however, humanity did make a direct attempt at communicating with aliens by beaming an interstellar message out towards a globular cluster 25,000 light years away. The only problem is that for anyone to receive the message, they would have to be situated directly in the path of the beam. Not only that, but the message took less than 3 minutes to transit, meaning even if an intelligent extraterrestrial civilization was perfectly situated in the path, they would have had less than 3 minutes to detect the signal. While it seems unlikely, it is possible that in 1977 we got lucky enough to detect a beam coming from an advanced extraterrestrial civilization down to Earth. A momentary burst of energy known as the WOW signal swept across the planet, but we have not been able to figure out its origin or been able to detect it since we heard it the first time. In 2012, however, we did send back a response, but we have yet to hear back from whoever sent the WOW signal. Perhaps, though, the reason we have yet to interact with intelligent life forms is because the universe has filtered them out, and one day it will will filter us out too. Basically, what I'm saying is that humanity and all other life forms have an expiry date that is pre-wired into our experience and that prohibits us from ever reaching the point of extraterrestrial communications and other planetary colonizations. Why? I'm not sure, but I'm assuming it's to protect the universe somehow. I mean, let's think about it. Let's say right now is the perfect time for life to exist on Earth, and one day, long after we're gone, it will be the perfect time for life to exist on, say, Venus. If we had already found a way to migrate to Venus and subsequently developed it to our liking and then polluted it beyond repair, the life that was supposed to exist there after we had moved on to the next planet would have zero chance at survival. So maybe the expiration date encoded into each and every living being across the universe is to allow each and every being to have its moment in time to exist. Branching off of that theory, the Great Filter Theory, we have the self-destruction theory, which is similar but just a bit different because instead of the universe giving us an expiration date pre-coded into our existence, self-destruction theory states that life on every planet is destined to kill itself in order to protect the planet itself rather than the universe as a whole. Like I said, the theories are really similar, but one is a universal law and one is planetary preservation. Self-destruction theory comes from the Medea hypothesis, which is based off Medea from Greek mythology, who killed her offspring. Basically, our planet is Medea and we are the offspring. The very thing that gave us life is destined to kill us as we take away its own life force. An example of this is the Ice Ages, which those who follow the self-destruction theory would blame on an excess of plants, which absorbed an excess amount of CO2, which led to extreme global cooling, greatly damaging the integrity of life on Earth. Now we've come in. We've killed off a bunch of plants, we've warmed the Earth up, but we warmed it up too much, and we've killed off a bunch of other living things. And this, once again, has greatly damaged the integrity of life on Earth, meaning that at some point in time before we are able to achieve an intelligence level that allows us to communicate and commute to these aliens, something is bound to come in and kill off humanity. Do you see what I'm saying? Another theory, however, states that Earth is actually the birthplace of all life, all aliens. It's the incubation theory that, to put it quite simply, states that Earth is an incubation ground for all life in our universe, and that once a civilization reaches a point of high enough intelligence, they leave to colonize other planets. If this is true, it makes sense why aliens who have gone through the same process wouldn't want to interfere with our own. This is our chance to prove to the rest of the universe that we are not the runts of the litter, but that we have the capabilities to evolve into a species that can branch out into the universe on our own. The same way people who make documentaries about nature aren't supposed to step in when a lion tries to eat a gazelle, there is an unspoken rule that prohibits aliens from interfering with our development until we have reached that final stage. And then of course there is zoo theory, which is similar to incubation theory in that aliens have decided not to interfere with our existence, but different in that zoo theory does not follow the notion that all life in the universe began and evolved on Earth. What's neat, or perhaps terrifying, about zoo theory is that it covers the idea that while we have not yet been able to observe extraterrestrial life forms ourselves, they have certainly been able to observe us, and they've been doing it for centuries. If this really is the case, I wonder if Earth is the entire zoo, or just one of many exhibits in a giant cosmic roadside attraction called the Milky Way. It's anyone's guess, really. Now, much like how in order to communicate with aliens via signal beam, we would have to send our communications to the exact right spot at the exact right time, the reason why we haven't seen aliens could just be a timing issue. It's entirely possible that aliens existed long before our current time. Maybe they were around for the beginning of humanity, and maybe they even visited Earth early on in order to aid with some architectural projects like the pyramids and Stonehenge, but now they're gone. Extinct, dunzo, we missed them, and they're not coming back. I feel like this theory makes a fair bit of sense when you consider the references made in ancient texts to godly humanoid figures that are now, for some reason, nowhere to be found. Perhaps extraterrestrial life forms knew they were dying out and stopped on Earth to keep their existence from becoming nothing but stardust. On the other hand, of course, perhaps we aren't late, but we're early. According to Abraham Leob of Harvard and Rafael Batista and David Salone of the University of Oxford, the chances of life on other planets is actually set to grow much higher in the distant future. I mean, life on Earth developed 30 million years after the Big Bang, and it's still in the early stages, So who's to say that in another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 20 million years, the galaxy won't be teeming with various intelligent life forms spread out across the cosmos? I mean, it makes sense, but so do the rest of these theories. Anyways, the likelihood of us being alone in this universe is slim, but the likelihood that we are lone intelligent beings in this universe, because the rest of life is still in single-celled stage 1, is much more probable. The dark forest hypothesis is another possible reason for our lack of alien communication. Basically, the hypothesis states that the reason we have not yet crossed paths with any other life form is due to a drive towards self-preservation and a fear of being destroyed by another hostile, undetected civilization. I mean, to be fair, if I were part of a peaceful, albeit guarded, civilization making my way through the cosmos, and I stumbled upon humanity, I would 100% be absolutely terrified. We're scary, there's no denying it. Don't even try. And what if there is another civilization out there even scarier than us? I don't want us to be looking in the wrong cosmic corner one day and accidentally run into our doom. Like, you wouldn't go looking into the corners of a dark forest to figure out what's lurking there that could possibly kill you, so why are we doing it in our universe? Furthermore, it's likely that out of this sphere, extraterrestrial species are not only not looking for us, but also actively working against being found. But then again, on the other hand, maybe aliens don't exist and we really are alone, floating through the vastness of space, inching closer and closer to our impending doom that will one day come in the form of a massive quasar swallowing our galaxy whole. A top secret exchange program between the United States government and planet Serpo, located in the Zeta Reticuli star system, aka the planet of the short grays. The project was allegedly created under the administration of President John F. Kennedy after the US government saved the life of an alien, EVA-1, who crash-landed on Earth back in 1947. Entirely grateful and forever indebted to humanity, the alien began working with the US government and teaching them about his home planet, Serpo. When EVA-1 died, he left behind communications technology, which the government then used to eventually get into contact with other Serpo natives. That is when the government made arrangements to send 12 specially trained astronauts to planet Serpo so that they may learn about life outside of our atmosphere. In order to reach Serpo, the 12 astronauts had to travel through a wormhole, after which the majority of them got sick and one unfortunately died of an aneurysm. But of course they kept going and eventually they reached the alien planet. For a decade they studied life on Serpo before returning home and assuming entirely new identities in order to protect the security of the mission. Fair enough, I suppose.
So what are the origins of this Project Serpo tale? Well, like with most conspiracies in the modern age, it started gaining popularity online and took off from there. It all started in 2005 when a series of anonymous emails began circulating among UFO researchers and enthusiasts. These emails, which were allegedly from a retired US government official who remained anonymous, laid out this insane story about an extraterrestrial exchange program. We'll talk more about this anonymous individual later. The Project Serpo story started making the rounds way faster than these types of stories would have back in the day. It was 2005, the internet was still relatively new in the grand scheme of things anyway, and the UFO community was just hungry for new sensational stories. And this one, it's pretty much the definition of sensational.
Remember that alien that I mentioned, EVA-1, that crash landed to Earth in 1947? Yeah, well that was actually the Roswell incident of 1947, and also the first time the US government supposedly made contact with aliens. As many of you are probably already aware, in 1947 an unidentified object crash landed on some farmland in Roswell, New Mexico. When Area 51 was alerted of the incident, they rushed to the scene, collected the object, and released a statement saying that what had come spiraling down to Earth a few nights prior was nothing more than a weather balloon. But then they sent the object out to another base for testing, and another, and another. Why? Well, because it wasn't actually a weather balloon. It was an alien spacecraft containing 6 aliens, 5 of which had died in the crash, and 1 of which came to be known as Extraterrestrial Biological Entity Number 1, or EVA-1. EVA-1 was taken to the Air Force facility in Los Alamos, where he stayed until his death in 1952. During this time, he learned to communicate with the military and told them some pretty interesting things.
Now, if the US government is really working with these alien beings, where might they be carrying out their activities? Area 51? Some hidden base in Antarctica? Well, some say they could be operating from an even more top secret place. Dulce Base. Dulce Base supposedly sits deep beneath the Colorado-New Mexico border, close to Dulce, New Mexico. Dulce Base is said to be a secret facility where humans and aliens are working together, exchanging ideas and doing all sorts of experiments. Multiple levels deep underground with high-tech labs. The rumors are that different alien species, from the Greys, from planet Serpo possibly, to the reptilians, are working hand in hand with the US government. As to what they're trying to accomplish, probably something really fun and good that we don't really need to bother worrying about. Stories about this place really started coming about from a man named Paul Benowitz, who claimed to have discovered an underground base near Dulce full of gray aliens and humans. His claims caught a lot of attention, but Benowitz's mental health eventually declined, and he ended up in a mental hospital, passed away in 2003. There's always been this rumor that he was part of a big, widespread misinformation campaign.
As I said, during EBA 1's time on Earth, he informed the US government of quite a few things. One being that Serpo natives, Ebans as they are referred to by humans, had actually been visiting Earth for the last 2,000 years with no issue, but unfortunately, this time new Earth radar technology that they don't have on Serpo caused the ship to go haywire and crash, killing the majority of the crew. In 1949, a similar thing happened. 6 Ebans crash landed, but this time unfortunately none of them made it. When the ship was examined, the military found a communications device, which they worked on with EBA 1 to repair. They got it working and sent out multiple distress signals, but it wasn't until after EBA 1's death in 1952 that they finally got a reply. Communications began between the US military and the Ebans. It took a while, but eventually they were able to understand one another. After learning about the 12 deceased Ebans stranded on Earth, the Ebans asked if they could come to Earth and retrieve the bodies. Of course, the military wanted something in return, so they came up with the exchange program. The military wanted tech, but the Ebans said, no, you're not ready for our tech. And so they proposed something else. In exchange for the bodies of their deceased, 12 astronauts could spend a decade on planet Serpo. Furthermore, an Eban would stay on Earth to assist the military. In 1964, the Ebans landed on Earth once again to retrieve the bodies, and Project Serpo, aka Project Crystal Night, as it has also been called, commenced.
The star system where these aliens are supposedly from has been at the center of some of the most famous alien abduction stories in history, including the Barney and Betty Hill abduction. Were these beings from Serpo, Ebans, or Greys, as they're typically called, responsible for abductions like this? The Barney and Betty Hill case is pretty interesting. In September of 1961, this American couple was driving through rural New Hampshire at night when they noticed strange lights in the sky that seemed to be tracking their car's movements. Barney decided to stop the car to get out and have a look, and what he allegedly saw were humanoid figures peering out from a hovering craft. The Hills peeled off as fast as they could, but they later realized they'd lost a pretty hefty chunk of time that they just didn't remember. But as the days passed, they started to remember things. They ended up reporting being taken aboard a UFO where they were subjected to medical examinations by beings described as small, with gray skin, oversized eyes, and tiny little anime mouths, that's the exact way they described it back then. It's a 60s term, anime mouths. Their account was one of the earliest descriptions of the now iconic image of your classic gray alien.
Of course, a regular mission to space is no walk in the park, but a mission to a faraway planet located in a star system entirely separate from our own, that's tough. And apparently so was the training process. It took an entire year of survival, escape, evasions, weapons, and psychological training for the 12 astronauts to become fully prepared for their mission. The crew consisted of scientists, linguists, pilots, 2 doctors, and a security officer. Over the course of a year, along with the standard training, one by one, each member of the crew was buried in a 6 by 5 foot box and kept there for 5 days as part of a training intensive. There was no light, no communication. station, just a small air hole that allowed the astronauts to receive food and water and not suffocate to death. It was tough, but they all passed, and the pilots even went on to learn how to operate alien spacecrafts. When it came time to take off, the 12 astronauts, along with 40 tons of gear, which included 10 motorcycles and 3 jeeps, were loaded into the spacecraft using anti-gravity technology, and one even came along to assist in their journey. When the ship was all boarded, each astronaut went to their own individual pod and settled in for the long journey ahead.
All right, before we get to what they saw on that journey, let's have a little bit of fun here and talk about something that comes up more than you'd probably think when Project Serpo or just interactions between aliens and humans is discussed. Hybrids. Yeah, aliens creating human-alien hybrids, either through experimentation or, God forbid, actually getting it on. This kind of thing always feels like it's going down the same rabbit hole that creepy online fan fiction does, where it's like, I'm gonna write about my fantasy of Alf impregnating Willie Tanner. I don't know. I'm not trying to shame, live your lives, but the concept of humans and aliens breeding with each other always feels inherently silly to me. With that said though, this does often play into the Project Serpo conspiracy. Those astronauts were apparently on this planet for a while. Who knows who they met? One thing could have led to another. Plus, in all these reported UFO abduction cases, who knows what kind of nasty experiments those Greys could have been doing.
When the crew arrived at Serpo, the first thing they noticed was that it was barren, bright, and hot. Really hot. About 107 degrees Fahrenheit or 41 degrees Celsius. Quickly, they realized why. Planet Serpo had 2 suns, which are shown here in a photograph taken by one of the astronauts, allegedly. One of the suns was orbited by Serpo, and the other was off in the distance. Because of this, the planet never got dark, and the days were 40 hours long, meaning that their decade-long mission was actually going to take 13 human years. In total, there are about 650,000 Ebens living on the planet in small, separate village communities and houses made of some kind of concrete rubber substance. It was a primitive life, but at the same time, the Ebens were equipped with electricity and incredibly advanced technology. Families generally consisted of a male and female Eben, and each family was allowed to have a maximum of 2 children, which were hidden away until they reached the age of maturity. During their time on Serpo, the astronauts gathered as much information about the Ebens as they could. And if you guys remember, I do believe I mentioned that one of the astronauts died on transit. Apparently the Ebens used that astronaut to clone and create hybrids of, like James mentioned. And it was then that the remaining astronauts realized that they weren't as peaceful as they once thought them to be. When it came time to return home, for some reason, 2 of the astronauts actually decided to stay, and then 2 more astronauts died on the way back to Earth. The surviving astronauts were given a large sum of money and an entirely new identity. That's great and all, but many of them were suffering from radiation poisoning due to the 2 suns and died soon after their return to Earth.
One of the most avid supporters of the Project Serpo conspiracy is a man named Richard Doughty, who we can't really talk about Serpo without talking about this guy. See, Richard Doughty has made some pretty outlandish claims, so outlandish that there's a whole other conspiracy that spawned around him and other government officials like him. Supposedly, Doughty was the man behind those anonymous emails I talked about earlier. Richard Doughty is a retired special agent who used to work for AFOSI, the United States Air Force Office of Special Investigation. But a lot of people think he wasn't actually investigating UFOs, but that he was part of a team spreading misinformation intentionally, basically muddying the waters and leaking supposedly secret info about the government's exchange program with alien beings in order to confuse the public, making it hard for us to tell what's real or not. Of course, the purpose behind the misinformation is, of course, to distract everyone from the actual nefarious things the government is up to. I mean, who doesn't get excited about aliens, right? I'm sure we'd all rather believe that the worst thing the government is doing is working with extraterrestrials instead of them doing some shady stuff at our own expense. Could there be some genuine truth about the planet Serpo thing? I mean, sure, maybe, but just something to keep in mind with stuff like this. In 1975, a pilot and several passengers flying a private plane near Pine Gap's airspace saw something they would never forget. The facility had only started operating 5 years before. Everyone was wondering what the hell was really going on in there, and the passengers and crew were hoping they were going to see something while flying overhead, and see something they did. A large white object appeared, taking off from the base at an incredibly high speed. The object moved so fast that it was nearly impossible for the witnesses to get a good look at it before it vanished into the sky. The pilot, upon landing, reported the sighting. They were told to wait for investigators, and when these investigators arrived, they supposedly told the group to keep their mouths shut about what they'd seen and to forget the incident entirely. Obviously, not all of them did, and if there wasn't already heavy speculation and controversy about this facility amongst the Australian public before, there certainly was now. Now, what exactly is the Pine Gap facility? Sitting right in the middle of the outback, not too far from the remote town of Alice Springs, officially it's known as the Joint Defense Facility Pine Gap, and it's run by both the US and Australian governments. But what exactly goes on there? Like with any facility like this, there's the official answer and the more speculative ones. The facility is decked out with some serious tech. Those big satellite dishes you see in movies? Pine Gap has plenty of them. They're used for all sorts of high-tech communication and surveillance activity. Officially, the facility is involved in intelligence gathering, satellite tracking, and missile detection. It's always been a controversial place though. It's seen a number of protests over the years, and many of them aren't even necessarily to do with the rumors and conspiracies, but they certainly don't help with its image. Pine Gap is rumored to be a secret site for advanced technology testing. Again, much like claims made about Area 51. A place where the military can try out their fancy new tech far away from the prying eyes of the public. And if you were gonna pick a spot for a test flight over your new advanced drone or aircraft, the Australian outback would be about as ideal as it gets. Ever seen Mad Max? Nothing out there but sand and kangaroos. I don't think there's actually any kangaroos in Mad Max, but you get my point. One of the main theories is that Pine Gap is involved in developing and testing advanced drones and aircraft. These drones could be used for anything from reconnaissance missions to lethal attacks. More on that next though. There are also rumors about Pine Gap being involved in cyber warfare testing, so developing new ways to protect against hacking or creating offensive strategies to mess with enemy computers. That's really the best way I can put it without doing a deep dive into exactly what hackers do on this kind of scale. I don't really know much about hacking other than the error messages I'd get that would screw up my janky old PC in the days of LimeWire. One of the biggest conspiracies is that Pine Gap is involved in operating spy satellites. I'd say a big part of this is the fact that it's jointly operated by the United States and Australia. It's partly run by the CIA, so that leads to some speculation for sure. It's rumored that Pine Gap plays a huge role in monitoring communications, radar, and other electronic signals from all over the world. The facility's remote location and the sophisticated tech make it a pretty ideal setup for controlling and receiving data from spy satellites orbiting Earth. There's a lot of speculation that Pine Gap works with various intelligence agencies to gather information on foreign military activity, enemy organizations, and just various global threats. I mean, this is barely even in the realm of conspiracy. It is a fact. It's involved in intelligence gathering, so I don't think spy satellites are really all that much of a stretch. It's really more of a question of, well, what exactly does this entail? Of course, they don't provide specifics because that would kind of defeat the purpose of the whole spying thing. Another one of the numerous conspiracy theories surrounding Pine Gap is its alleged role as an NSA or National Security Agency listening post. Edward Snowden famously brought this up, and it certainly makes the whole thing feel a lot more credible. According to the theory, Pine Gap is involved in surveillance and data collection, targeting domestic and international communications, using its advanced listening technology to intercept phone calls, your emails. Edward Snowden Snowden isn't the only guy to come out having said this, though. There are other whistleblower testimonies alleging that Pine Gap collaborates closely with the NSA to gather intelligence. Their claim is that the facility's ideal location and the powerful antennas make for intercepting large amounts of data, which is then processed and analyzed by intelligence analysts. Another intense rumor about Pine Gap is that it's involved in coordinating lethal drone strikes. Pine Gap is believed to have the tech and connections to control and direct drones used in targeted killings. So we already know they have the technology to efficiently gather intelligence and track targets. So once a target is identified, the data is sent to operators who can launch and guide drones to hit specific targets, often in remote or hard to reach areas. These drones can carry out precision strikes, taking out high value targets with little to no risk to any human soldiers. The idea that Pine Gap could be involved in operations like this, again, stems from the fact that it's another hub for US intelligence and military agencies. So it's no secret that the US has used drones for targeted strikes in various parts of the world, and Pine Gap's advanced technology would be a major asset for this type of thing. Accusations about drone strikes have been denied, but I mean, of course, they're gonna deny something like that. Targeted drone strikes are probably the most controversial part of modern warfare. After one drone strike in July of 2013 in Pakistan, campaigners claimed the intelligence for the strike came from Pine Gap. There was a ton of outrage, and a number of human rights groups called for a UN inquiry into whether the Australian government could be seen as complicit in the strikes alongside the US military. There were even some allegations that Australian officials might have facilitated targeted killing, which would be against international law. Now, on to the stuff you've all been waiting for, of course, aliens and UFOs. Pine Gap has been a hotspot for conspiracy theories involving extraterrestrial research pretty much ever since it began operations. Some people are convinced that the facility is hiding evidence of alien life and is deeply involved in studying them and their technology. And this isn't just a situation of like, oh well, a big top secret government facility, gotta be aliens, right? No, there have been a lot of strange sightings in the area surrounding Pine Gap. Some people will even claim that Pine Gap is part of a global network of secret bases that collaborate on extraterrestrial research. Again, the American involvement certainly plays into this, so Pine Gap may be another facility like Area 51, according to the conspiracy anyway, where captured alien technology is reverse engineered. This could mean everything from developing new energy sources to building advanced propulsion systems similar to ones aliens could be using. There's also rumors that Pine Gap has underground facilities specifically designed for housing alien artifacts and possibly even extraterrestrial beings themselves. Let's get into some detail on a UFO sighting specifically, shall we? One of the most talked about encounters at Pine Gap happened early in the morning on December 22nd of 1989. So 3 men were heading home after an all-night hunting trip when something out of the ordinary caught their attention. It was around 4:30 a.m. when they noticed what looked like a door. It was camouflaged to blend into its surroundings. Suddenly it opened right in front of them, and from behind it there was a huge metallic gray disc. The disc moved slightly, hovering over the base for a few moments. The hunters stood there, frozen in shock, and watched as this disc shot upwards and then vanished into the sky. As they tried to process what they'd just seen, they saw the camouflage door slowly move back into place, sealing shut as if it had never been there. Pine Gap employs around 1,000 people, and most of them live in the nearby town of Alice Springs. The workers are a mix of Australian and US intelligence personnel, but Alice Springs has a large American population, thanks to Pine Gap obviously, and visitors and townsfolk will often say, if you ask any of these Americans about their jobs, the common answer you'll get is that they're gardeners. It's apparently so common that it's become kind of an inside joke. Are all these people who say they're gardeners really gardeners, or could gardener be a cover for the real work these individuals do at the facility? Some people think that these so-called gardeners are involved in secretive operations at Pine Gap. Gardening, it's a pretty low-key profession, makes for a pretty convenient front for intelligence personnel and want to avoid drawing attention. At least that's what I'd say if everyone else hadn't picked that front too. I mean, you know, baker, carpenter, plenty of jobs to pick from, guys. Weather control. No, Pine Gap isn't even safe from accusations of weather control. This theory is pretty much exactly what it sounds like. The idea is that the facility has the capability to manipulate weather patterns using advanced technology to create or alter it. And maybe they have help from some of that alien technology they're reverse engineering. Again, even without the possible secret alien technology hidden inside, people see the sophisticated equipment combined with the secretive nature of the facility, and questions start to form in people's heads like, could they be playing God and screwing with the weather? Could they be using methods like cloud seeding or even more advanced techniques, creating rain and drought-stricken areas? That would be nice. Or maybe they're working on ways to weaponize the weather. The concept of weather control isn't entirely far-fetched either. Various governments have been known to have explored weather modification in the past. And we're going to start things off with Point Dume underwater base. So off the coast of Point Dume in Malibu, there seems to be this mysterious structure lying about 6 miles underwater. Images captured on Google Earth show an oval-shaped object resting on the seabed floor. Looks like it has a large flat top and what seems to be pillars or columns. Looking at it, it definitely looks like the entrance to something. It sits about 2,000 feet beneath the ocean surface, spanning nearly 3 miles in width, and some speculate that it could be more than just a naturally formed structure. And yes, some even think it could be an underwater alien base. Jimmy Church, who hosts a California-based radio show called Fade to Black, was pretty excited about the images, stating, "My first impression was that it was Greek. It looked artificial and didn't look natural. When you're looking at it from above, it's a nearly perfect oval shape. In the natural surroundings, nothing is symmetrical. Everything is eroded and covered in rocks and sloping and peaking. And right here, for 2 miles, it is a perfect oval with a black separation or outline to it. It just stands out that it has to be some type of roof. It's not unlike a dome stadium or a covered indoor racetrack or an Olympic arena. It's got that feel to it. It looks like a perfect oval man-made structure sitting on a construction site." Next up, we have the Solomon Islands UFOs. There have been some very strange things said to go on here for hundreds and hundreds of years, and not only have locals claimed to see strange lights in the sky, but also coming up from under the water as well, which has led to a pretty intense theory that there could be an underwater alien base there. There have always been local legends of monstrous giants on the islands, 10-foot tall, hairy creatures with flat noses and glowing red eyes. That, combined with the reports of strange lights in the sky, moving with incredible speed and agility, could mean there may be some kind of connection here. You see, some of these lights and strange flying objects have been seen descending down into the trees of the Guadalcanal or rising up from the ocean and zipping around before diving back down. There are also legends that these giants that are said to live on the island move around through subterranean tunnels. So some speculate that beneath the surface of the ocean is this hidden structure where extraterrestrial beings may be conducting their activities. Next up, we have Hy Brasil, a small mythological island off the coast of Ireland. According to Celtic folklore, this island is said to lie off the west coast of the country, appearing only every 7 years, usually surrounded by mist. The island is often described as a paradise with advanced technology and a society living in total harmony with nature. Sailors and explorers have reported spotting the island for centuries, claiming to have seen strange creatures and these glowing godlike beings there. Maps from the 14th to the 19th centuries often included Hy Brasil, but its exact location was always a bit of a mystery. Now, of course, it sounds like complete folklore, which Celtic culture is absolutely full of, but what if there's something else going on here? Well, some have suggested that the islands appearing and disappearing could have an extraterrestrial connection. The idea is that aliens could be using advanced cloaking technology or have a hidden base on or beneath the island, and the mysterious creatures that some sailors claimed to have seen on the island do sound like they could be alien-like, but it's still a total mystery as to what they'd be doing over there. Next up on the list, we have strange skulls that were found in an underwater cave in Mexico. So in 2012, divers were exploring a cenote and the Yucatan Peninsula where they came across across two chambers full of human bones, and some of these bones were human skulls, but there was something off about them. They were elongated. Now, the ancient Maya were said to have performed human sacrifices in the area, and skull deformation was also practiced in various parts of Mexico way back when. There are theories as to why, but nothing entirely concrete. One idea is that high-ranking members of society had elongated skulls. Some say that people's skulls were elongated just to differentiate certain groups from one another, but there's also the theory that these skulls never belonged to human beings at all. Pretty common knowledge, of course, that there are tons of conspiracy theories surrounding the ancient Maya, including the presence of extraterrestrials that may have helped them construct all their intricate advanced cities. So could these skulls have belonged to these supposed alien beings? It's possible. Next up, we have the Lake Baikal incident. So this lake in southern Siberia is the world's largest freshwater lake by volume. It's incredibly deep, and there are some pretty eerie stories about it. First of all, there's all the mysterious lights that are reported, not just hovering or flying above it, but also coming from the depths of the water. And there's a very creepy story that was supposedly an attempted cover-up by the Russian government. So in 1982, a team of Navy divers were doing a routine diving exercise in the lake when a number of them started spotting something pretty disturbing. There were all these figures deep under the water. They were tall and slender, well over 6 feet tall, and wearing what looked to be silver suits. Those suits could have also been silvery scales. They also had large, circular, glowing, unblinking eyes. The creatures began chasing after the divers, or swimming after them, rather, and the divers panicked and then swam back up to the surface, and they reported what they'd seen to their superiors, but that's where the story ends. The existence of the strange creatures has never been confirmed or denied. Next up, we have underwater alien bases in Alaska. So claims of alleged alien bases lurking beneath the waters off the coast of Alaska have been around for quite a while, but in recent years, the idea of them has become more of a popular thing, mostly thanks to ancient aliens. Thank you, ancient aliens. But apparently, there are even eyewitness accounts dating back several decades, which have been mostly undisclosed until recently. UFOologists and UFO enthusiasts have now been turning their attention to the mysterious activities in the waters of Alaska. One incident dates back to 1945 when crew members of a ship reported spotting an unidentified craft. Researchers, including members of MUFON, or the Mutual UFO Network, which is a non-profit organization that studies reported UFO sightings, they think it's possible that extraterrestrial beings have been constructing bases beneath the ocean's surface, and that's because there are tons of reports of UFO movements over the water. There were also a number of UFO sightings in the 40s that weren't disclosed to the public at the time. These undisclosed reports allegedly provide evidence that there are extraterrestrial entities operating in the waters off the coast of Alaska. This next story comes to us from Reddit, and although what this person saw wasn't technically under the water, it was floating just above it, and it's a pretty fascinating account. The story comes to us from user Keslow, who writes, I used to live in Charleston, South Carolina back around 2006, and I had a job that had me leaving home at about 4 a.m. I lived in a bad part of town near the International Airport Joint Base, so when I left, I did a scan of the area before getting into my car. One morning, I stepped out of my home to do my scan and noticed that there were thin, wispy clouds flowing in off the ocean. Basically, it was a thin fog, about 1,000 to 1,500 feet up, moving like a river. I also noticed at this point that there were two effing moons. One is obscured by the thin clouds, our real moon, and the other is most definitely under the clouds. It was a sphere of glowing white light. It made no sound and did not move. After about 2 minutes, it bolted eastward towards the ocean. The glowing light faded quickly right as it took off as well. I've seen planes move near the speed of sound, and this thing went from 0 to like 3,000 miles per hour instantly. No acceleration. Much faster than the speed of sound with no sonic boom. I hope I don't see it again, especially on the water. I always wondered if it bolted because they saw me watching them. Next up, we have the strange reports of a large disc-like object being spotted in the Indian Ocean. Apparently as far back as 1873, ships sailing the Indian Ocean from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea have reported spotting a massive mile-wide disk passing beneath their boats, accompanied by large, rotating lights. One of the earliest documented sightings happened on March 23rd of 1873, when the ship Adelaide traversed the South China Sea. Witnesses reported floating over a huge, glowing circular object beneath the ocean's surface. On May 15th, 1879, the crew of the HMS Vulture described the sighting of two large Ferris wheels spinning in opposite directions. The spokes of these wheels were reported to be 25 feet wide, with 100 feet of space between them. There have been tons of these reports in various locations in the Indian Ocean, over the years. On April 4th, 1901, for example, in the Persian Gulf, the crew of the SS Kilwa claimed to see rays of light emanating from an underwater disc-like object. And even in 1943, in the Persian Gulf, a sailor named Matthew Mangle reported a huge glowing disc beneath the water's surface pacing his ship. And these are just a handful of examples. And coming in at second place is the Michigan Stonehenge. So in 2007, a professor of underwater archaeology, Mark Hawley, made a pretty incredible discovery. It was this arrangement of stones lying on the lake bed, looking a lot like Stonehenge in England. The stones are laid out in a circular pattern, and some even appear to be arranged in a line. They're about 40 feet below the surface of the lake. So what was the purpose of this formation? Could it be the remnants of an ancient civilization? Could extraterrestrials have constructed it thousands of years ago? They look like they've been placed in a pretty precise pattern. Doesn't look to be natural forming to me. And of course, there's also a rock with a mastodon carved into it. Hard to believe something like that would be created naturally. What's also really fascinating is that these stones are believed to be about 9,000 years old, predating Stonehenge by about 4,000 years. And finally, it's only natural that we finish things off with what has to be the most famous strange object discovered deep beneath the sea, the Baltic Sea anomaly. So back in the summer of 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters didn't come across any treasure in terms of monetary gain anyway, but they did find something pretty cool, a sonar image that seems to show a strange UFO-like object on the sea floor. Peter Lindbergh, the leader of the treasure hunting team, would be so awesome just to be able to say you're the leader of a treasure hunting team. I could say that and I'd just be digging through my backyard finding nothing. But this guy actually goes out on boats and submarines and does it. I didn't get that job. Anyway, he's the leader of Ocean X and was pretty astonished by what he had found, saying the object definitely didn't look like a natural formation. And even though a number of researchers have come out and said it probably is a natural formation, I still get excited looking at this thing. I don't know, I'm just not entirely convinced. I'm on the fence about this one. But what do you guys think? Alien craft, ancient artifact, just some mundane natural formation? Let us know down in them comments.
What does it mean? In our number 8 spot today, we have the Nazca lines. We've all heard of alien crop circles at one point or another. I remember watching the movie Signs when I was younger, and then I couldn't sleep for 13 years. The birthday party scene is just too much for me. And that is exactly why this next one freaked me out. Just 200 miles southeast of Peru, we can find hundreds of markings etched into the earth. They're massive pieces of art, like crop circles, but more intimidating. The biggest ground graffiti spans over 1,200 feet. Many people believe this was an ancient ritual for water. Given its location, that theory checks out. Another theory, written in 1968 in Eric von Daniken's book Chariots of the God, suggests that ancient Nazca was a site for alien visitors, leaving behind knowledge in the form of these massive doodles and technology. One of them just says Garbazar was here. We're like, oh, nice. And on number 7 spot today, we have the Ice Age art. More ancient artwork, this time from the Colombian Amazon. Thing is, unlike other drawings found on the ceilings of tombs, this canvas stretches about 8 miles. The paintings are even more impressive, dating back to 12,000 years ago. These were made near the end of the last ice age. Thousands of paintings, by the way, not just a handful of arrows either. These were found in 2017, but it was only last year when they went public with the findings. sightings. The findings being paintings of elephants, massive sloths, horses from the Ice Age, snakes, birds, deer. This is now one of the largest collections of rock art in South America. Pregnant women? Or the origins of the Ninja Turtles? You tell me. In our number 6 spot today we have Tomb KV55. Located in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt, Tomb 55, otherwise known as KV55, was discovered by Edward Ayrton back in 1907. And the reason we call this tomb by a number rather than a name is because we really don't know who or what is inside. Even the walls inside aren't like other tombs, covered in ancient hieroglyphs, tipping the reader off on the noble history of the king that lies before them. Nothing is here. The only hint that remains is one hieroglyph, and it translates to, "The evil one shall not live again." Even these massive stones were built in order to prevent anything from getting out. Usually with these ancient tombs, it's the opposite. The description for those inside the tomb has also been destroyed, so we have no idea who's in KV55 or what. Many believe it's Akhenaton, and back then they didn't believe in multiple gods, just one, so Akhenaton got on the wrong foot with the high priests, and over his 17 years of ruling, he was convincing everybody that their art and religion was wrong, and there was only one god in existence. This was the sun god. His own son, King Tut, succeeded him and luckily restored the previous religion, but maybe the sun god was passing knowledge to him, or maybe he just loved staring at the sun, or maybe aliens. Honestly, we gotta tie it back in somehow. In our number 5 spot today we have the Voynich manuscript. In 1912, an antique bookseller somehow stumbled upon the Voynich manuscript. This is a book that is 250 pages long, and while it shows some images of different things, it is also completely written in an unknown alphabet. The book is said to be from around 600 years ago, but why have we never seen this alphabet at all before? Aliens? A researcher by the name of Stephen Bax has apparently been able to decipher 14 of the characters in the book, but do you really know for sure? It is said that while this book may have been written in some unknown language, it may also possibly be code for something that is yet to be cracked. While I truly have no idea what secrets this book holds, I do hope it's nothing of importance to us now. Or maybe the aliens are just trying to make contact. Write in English, please. In our number 4 spot today we have the Atacama Giant. This massive geoglyph is located in the Atacama Desert of Chile. Looks like an alien doodle. I love this little guy. It is a large human-like figure measuring 86 meters in height, and it is believed to have been created by the pre-Columbian peoples who inhabited the area over 1,000 years ago. The figure's arms are raised and its body is decorated with symbols and designs that are thought to have been religious or have astronomical significance. Imagine finding this one day hundreds of years ago. It would be absolutely jarring. The purpose of the geoglyph remains a mystery. Who were they trying to communicate with in the skies? The geoglyph is speculated to have been used for astronomical observation or as a spiritual symbol. Today, the Atacama Giant is considered an important archaeological site and a cultural landmark in the region. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Northern Kazakhstan geoglyphs. This is a package deal, more than one symbol in this one. Massive, mysterious geoglyphs were found in the remote regions of northern Kazakhstan. These geoglyphs consisted of various shapes and symbols, including circles, squares, lines, some of which stretch for several kilometers across the landscape. Our last one was one symbol, one little guy. This one here is much larger. The origin and purpose of these geoglyphs of course remain unknown, but they are believed to have been created by the ancient nomadic tribes who inhabited the region over 2,000 years ago. Some experts speculate that the geoglyphs may have been used for religious or ceremonial purposes, while others believe that they may have served as navigational aids. Or, if you're clicking this video, maybe they were communicating with higher beings. Maybe it was aliens, I'm just saying, alright? Today, the Northern Kazakhstan geoglyphs are considered a very important archaeological site. In our number 2 spot today, we have the stone circles. The Middle Eastern stone circles are a collection of ancient structures consisting of standing stones. You guessed it, all forming circles. They're found in various parts of the Middle East. Again, an incredible amount of work was required to coordinate these geoglyphs. The stone circles are over 5,000 years old and were likely used for religious or astronomical purposes. researchers have agreed that there must have been some sort of leader or head architect involved in order to make these circles happen. Maybe an alien architect. He's just laying out floor plans for this lovely new planet he found. Experts believe that they could have been used to herd wild animals, or the stone circles could have been used in ceremony after death. Finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Sajama Lines. The Sajama Lines were rediscovered in the 1930s in the Sajama National Park in Bolivia. It's a massive network of straight lines and geometric shapes stretching over 20 kilometers over the surrounding landscape. What creeps me out the most is that this looks like another planet. This looks like a crater with lines shooting out of it, almost like an ancient alien highway. Maybe I'm crazy, but we're here at number 1 after all. Some experts believe that the Sajama Lines were used for astronomical observation, as they are aligned with the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. That's both impressive, but also terrifying. Okay, starting off in our number 10 spot, we have big circles. These large ancient stone spheres were found by archaeologists in Jordan, and they have been the cause of confusion for many ever since. These stones were dated back to around 2,000 years ago, and so far about 11 or 12 of them have been found. These stone structures are nearly circular, and they range in size from 720 feet to 1,200 feet in diameter. There aren't any purposefully placed holes in the stones, so it isn't believed that they were used for either humans or animals to walk through. So what are they? Well, no one is exactly sure, to be honest. Researchers are trying to compare these structures to other similar ones in an attempt to find an answer to that question, but so far, only mysteries remain. In our number 9 spot today, we have Pumapunku. This site is located in Bolivia, and it boasts a series of stone structures. One of the most notable and remarkable things about this site is how precisely the stones here were cut. It is believed that this site dates back to somewhere around 536 AD, and while it now lay in ruins, it is thought to have once been an incredibly wondrous place filled with things like polished metal plaques, bright ceramics, and different fabrics. It isn't quite known exactly what this site was used for entirely, partly because of its age, but also because of the lack of written record and the deterioration that can be seen on the site. Because of the impressive size of the site, as well as the technology that was used to build it, this is a place that many people often say was built by aliens, but it was actually the Incas. They were incredibly talented craftsmen, and just because we couldn't pull it off today doesn't mean that we should take their credit away. In our number 8 spot today, we have Stonehenge. This prehistoric monument is located in England, and it is a set of stones that are oriented towards the sunrise on the summer solstice. This stone monument is thought to have been created somewhere from 3000 to 2000 BC, and it truly is one of the most famous landmarks ever. Stonehenge is thought to have been an ancient burial ground right from early in its creation for somewhere around 500 years. There are many theories surrounding this incredible monument regarding who could have created it, as experts just aren't quite sure. Since this was from a time before we had written records, we may never know for sure. Maybe this one is just destined to stay a mystery. In our number 7 spot today, we have the face on Mars. In 1976, as the NASA Viking orbiter was flying through space-time, it spotted what really appeared as a face on the surface of Mars. This face is nearly 2 miles long, and it is located within the smooth plains of northern Mars. This was striking because, like I mentioned, northern Mars is more smooth plains, while the southern area is where the cratered land can be found, but also because it's a huge face that looks like it's coming out of the planet. While it has been said that this face on Mars is actually just some sort of tabletop mountain, I prefer to take some liberties with that story. I'm just saying, out of everything on this list today, this one has got to be alien made. In our number 6 spot today, we have Machu Picchu. This incredible and stunning site was built over 500 years ago, and it was once known as the lost city of the Inca. Our modern discovery of this site came in 1911 when the archaeologist Hiram Bingham and his team stumbled upon it almost accidentally while looking for another ancient city. Of course, this site was not built by aliens and instead was built by the incredible Incas. People often refer to this as a place that may have been built by aliens because of the fact that the Incas were so ahead of their time in their ability ability to create absolutely amazing things, and because of the fact that all these years later, Machu Picchu is still standing. The stones used to create this site weighed over 50 tons, and it certainly doesn't have a location that would have been convenient to its construction. Through earthquakes and all of the terrible weather that Earth has seen in the last 500 years, Machu Picchu remains, and that is a testament to how brilliant their work really was. Another reason many people talk about this site being built by aliens is because of the elongated skulls that were found nearby, but guess what? This was actually a sign of royalty for the Incas, so maybe we should think twice about what we say when in the presence of royalty. And we should definitely be giving credit to them and all of the people who once took part in building this place, because we certainly couldn't do it today, what they did in the 15th century. In our number 5 spot today, we have the works of old men. The works of old men are structures that were first observed from the air by a British pilot in 1927, and they are located near the Azraq Oasis in Jordan. There are hundreds of these wheel-like structures that are each over 80 feet wide, some even as large as 200 feet. These huge structures have been dated back so far that they just might be the oldest man-made creations that we have ever found. While this is all amazing, we have absolutely no idea what they are or why they were created. The theories range from things like sun tracking to ceremonies to some sort of spiritual relevance, but we just aren't really sure. While things like this are incredible finds, and it's amazing that some of the first man-made things still exist on our Earth, it's insane that we have no idea what they are or how to use them, and unfortunately, because of the fact that it's been thousands and thousands of years, it's most likely that the mysteries surrounding them are totally lost with the past. In our number 4 spot today, we have Sacsayhuaman. This site is located in Cuzco, Peru, and it is another fascinating and seemingly impossible stone structure that was built by the Incas. This structure was once believed to have been a fortress, but now it is believed it may have actually been used for things like ceremonies. Why this is another incredible creation is because of the fact that we can't quite figure out how it could have been built. The stones in the structure fit together so perfectly that they're able to stay together without anything holding them in place, and they've done so for years and years. This, coupled with how large some of the stones were, is enough to completely stump experts. Despite how well the stones all fit together, apparently they all have different shapes, which has led researchers to believe that the building design was kind of made up as the structure was being built. Imagine that. Improving building a structure and it lasts for hundreds and hundreds of years and goes on to stump humanity for a while. I'm just saying. It's pretty cool. It becomes more and more apparent how talented and brilliant the Incas really were. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Nazca Lines. If you were to head to the Nazca Desert, just about 200 miles southeast of Lima in southern Peru, you'd find the most famous geoglyphs in the world. The Nazca Lines. Researchers believe that these lines might be something like 2 millennia old, and other than how they are incredible works of art, these often get referred to as a possible site of alien visitation because it just seems like making these should have been impossible 2,000 years ago. The geoglyphs are more than 800-foot long white lines etched into the desert, as well as 300 geometric shapes and 70 different animal figures. The biggest shape stretches around 1,200 feet across, which leads to my point about why these lines are so incredibly fascinating. These images can only be fully seen from high above in the air, so thinking back 2,000 years ago, how did humans make these without the vantage points we have now? I'm not exactly sure, but it definitely is nothing shy of amazing. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Yonaguni Monument. Just off of the coast of Yonaguni in Japan, there is a diving location that was first discovered in 1986 by a diver. He noticed some strange sort of formation that was located on the seabed that looked as if it could be some sort of structure, so he swam down to go investigate. When he went down and didn't find any more answers to his question, he of course had to spill the tea on what he had stumbled upon. When researchers heard about this, they ended up diving down to check out what this formation could be, and thus the Yonaguni Monument was considered officially discovered. This monument, which kind of resembles stairs made for giants, is made of sandstone and limestone, but there's one super mysterious thing about it. Experts cannot agree on the origins of this thing. Some people believe it was a naturally occurring formation, while others swear it was man, or perhaps alien-made. The Yonaguni Monument is at least 10,000 years old, so at the end of the day, anyone's guess is as good as mine. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments how you think the Yonaguni monument came to be. In our number 1 spot today we have Göbekli Tepe. This is a pre-pottery Neolithic archaeological site that is located in Turkey. This site has been dated back all the way to somewhere from 9,500 to 8,000 BC, making it the world's oldest known megalith, which is truly just incredible. This site is comprised of a bunch of large circular structures that are being supported by massive stone pillars, many of which are decorated with abstract anthropomorphic details and things which has provided rare and valuable insight into prehistoric religion and the iconography of the times when this was built. One of the most amazing things about this area is that it was first used at the beginning of the Neolithic period, which marks the oldest human settlements anywhere in the world. It has been called the world's first temple, and it was used by groups of nomadic hunter-gatherers from a wide area. Without a doubt, this was one of the best archaeological finds our modern society has ever had, as it gives us just a glimpse into what life was like in prehistoric times.
Number 10. Astronaut sightings. Who better to trust about what's going on in space than people who have actually been to space before? That's right, numerous astronauts over the years have reported seeing things that they think might be UFOs. Buzz Aldrin was one of the astronauts aboard the Apollo 11, and during their journey they all reported seeing flying objects. Of course, space debris exists, and it could just be some metal junk that was adrift in space. But then why did they report that the objects appeared to be following them? When they thought that it might have just been a detached part of the rocket that was flying alongside them, they were informed that this piece was actually 6,000 miles away from them, and they definitely wouldn't have been able to see it from that far away. He also said that when they brought it up, they were briefed to not talk about what they had seen out in space. Well, the government can try all they want to cover things up, but eventually word always gets out. Number 9. Paintings. Now let's go well beyond spaceships and astronauts and move into the far more distant past, because alien sightings certainly aren't a new thing and seem to have been around for centuries. One piece of evidence that people often cite is a painting titled The Madonna with Saint Giovannino. It was painted in the 15th century by Dominic Ghirlandaio and appears to depict a UFO flying around in the background, its shape matching up with people's frequent depictions of flying saucers as being alien spacecrafts. There also appear to be beams of light coming out from the bottom of the ship, and this has led people to believe that it is unmistakably an alien craft and not just something else placed up in the sky. And if you take a look at it, it does seem hard to believe that it could be anything else, as what other dark object would make sense to be floating in the sky like that? If you have any ideas, let me know what else you think it might be. Number 8. The Tic Tac UFO. Back in 2004 on the coast of California, a US Navy pilot named David Fravor reported seeing something strange. In fact, he reported seeing something that was, quote, something not from this earth. They were about 60 to 100 miles off the coast of California, and he was leading a strike fighter squadron through some exercises when the incident occurred. He said that he saw a tic-tac shaped vessel flying through the air at incredible speeds, but it wasn't just him who saw it. It was also reported by another flight crew who actually followed after the craft and even filmed it. While the footage was originally kept classified, it's now been made available to the public. The case was then published by the New York Times after the Pentagon acknowledged its Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, which is actually the Pentagon's own 21st century study of UFO sightings. Number 7. Wow! Exclamation point. The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, otherwise known as SETI, is a group that, well, searches for extraterrestrial intelligence. In 1977, a large radio telescope outside of Ohio was scanning the skies on behalf of SETI when they picked up a signal that lasted for 72 seconds. The printouts of readings often included low numbers, which was typically just the background noise that the telescope picked up. But then a scientist noticed that there was a sudden string of letters as well as larger numbers. The letters went all the way up to U, which indicated a signal 30 times stronger than the typical background noise. Upon seeing these consecutive letters, which would represent a very strong signal and something potentially alien, he circled them and wrote the word wow followed by an exclamation point in bright red pen. To this day, we've never really seen anything else like it, and the extraordinary readout has yet to ever be duplicated. Number 6. Viking Mars. Now let's get into some more sciencey factual stuff. When people think of aliens, the term that might often come to mind is Martians, being attributed specifically to aliens that reside on the planet of Mars. NASA has sent a lot of things out there, and one expedition was referred to as Viking, them sending out little robots to take readings of the planet. One test that they performed was done on the soil, mixing soil with radioactive carbon-labeled nutrients to see if they would produce radioactive methane gas, this being a chemical sign of life on other planets. And it did, the test coming back with a positive result and finding organic molecules. But NASA just brushed it off, I guess, because they said that the other experiments didn't end up with the same results, so they just said it was a false positive. But one of the original scientists and others who have analyzed the data stand by their discovery, saying that the other experiments had just been ill-equipped for performing the tests and finding the same results. Number 5. Martian Fossil. Let's hear from NASA again, this event taking place in 1996 when they announced that they had found a Martian fossil. They said that they had found fossilized microbes within a lump of Martian rock, a meteorite that is theorized to have been blasted off the planet around 15 million years ago before finally winding up in Antarctica, where it was discovered 12 years prior in 1984. They analyzed it a lot, of course, and found organic molecules as well as small bits of the mineral known as magnetite, which can sometimes be found in Earth bacteria. Researchers also said that under an electron microscope they were able to see traces of nanobacteria. So it seems like evidence is continuing to stack up that other planets are, or used to be, capable of sustaining life. And with a universe as infinitely large as ours, it's hard to say that it's impossible that life on other planets could ever exist. Number 4. The Super Hornet. Let's now take a look at another piece of evidence that came out following the Pentagon's acknowledgement of their Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. This took place back in 2015 on the East Coast and is another video of evidence discovered by the US Navy, this time by a FA-18 Super Hornet, a strike fighter that reaches speeds of up to 2,000 kilometers an hour. That's pretty fast. The pilots see the unidentified object moving at incredibly high speeds over the water and they struggle to keep up but are finally able to get a lock on it. When they do, they start cheering and one even says, "What the F is that thing?" They continue to follow it and seem to be unable to figure out what it possibly could be. This is another piece of evidence that had to go through a declassification process before it could be released to the public. Makes you wonder what other video footage and potential signs of alien life the government might be hiding from us in a filing cabinet labeled classified. Number 3. Chicago O'Hare. In November 2006 in Chicago, Illinois, airline staff and pilots alike were shocked by what they had witnessed. Multiple people reported seeing what they described as a flying saucer in the air. It was an overcast day and the UFO seemed to be just hovering over the Chicago O'Hare airport terminal. They then described how it seemed to shoot up into the air incredibly quickly, so fast that it punched a hole through the cloud cover above it. The FAA, or Federal Aviation Administration, described it as simply being a strange weather phenomenon and they wouldn't be investigating it, so don't worry about it. Of course, that's what they want us to think. But so many people at once reporting seeing a flying saucer shooting through the clouds doesn't really sound like a weather phenomenon to me. One flight traffic control official said, "To fly 7 million light years to O'Hare and then have to turn around and go home because your gate was occupied is simply unacceptable." Number 2. SETI readings. Now let's go back to the SETI project again. If you've somehow already forgotten by now, that refers to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Back in 2003, they were using a large telescope in Puerto Rico to re-examine around 200 sections of the sky that had all previously shown unexplained radio signals. All of the signals had disappeared except for one, which had actually become stronger. It came from a spot between the constellations Pisces and Aries where there aren't any known stars or planets. The signal was emitting the frequency for hydrogen, the most common element which both absorbs and emits energy. Some astronomers believing that this is the most likely element aliens might use to send a message to us for this reason. The signal from this spot in space has now been recorded a total of 3 times, and has left many people wondering if it is truly a signal coming from aliens. Number 1. The Phoenix Lights. On March 13th in 1997, an event took place that was referred to as Lights over Phoenix, or the Phoenix Lights phenomenon. On this day, hundreds of witnesses reported seeing otherworldly lights across Arizona, Nevada, and northern Mexico. There were two main events, the first being a giant V-shaped aircraft that had 5 lights on it, maybe thrusters, though it apparently didn't make any sound. Then later that night, there were a series of red and orange lights in the sky that didn't appear to move at all. And while air traffic control employees could see the lights in the sky, they couldn't see them on their radars. The governor of the state of Arizona at the time said, "I'm a pilot and I know just about every machine that flies. It was bigger than anything I've ever seen. It remains a great mystery." And it really does remain a mystery. To this day, nobody seems to have any real or solid explanation for what the large spacecraft and the lights might have been. It was said that it was a military flare drop, but this came after their original statement that they had no planes in the air. And even a recreation of the event didn't line up with what people had seen, flares flickering and burning out after only a few seconds. I have an explanation though. It was aliens.
Number 10. Recent sighting. Middletown was shaken by an extraordinary event last month as residents reported witnessing a display of rotating green lights hovering above them. The inexplicable sighting, which occurred around 10:30 p.m., left many in awe and pondering the possibility of extraterrestrial activity. One individual, Caden Little, managed to capture the event on video while on Jerry Couch Boulevard. Caden described his initial reaction as a mix of fear and fascination, exclaiming, "I instantly thought like we're under attack by aliens. It was scary." Fortunately, the lights abruptly disappeared without any hostile action, providing some relief. Eyewitnesses, including Bryce Garrick, observed the lights rotating in a clockwise motion before swiftly darting across the sky and vanishing. The bewildering speed at which the lights maneuvered ruled out the possibility of drones, according to Brian Simpson, president of the Cincinnati Astronomical Society. So what was it? Who knows, but my bet is aliens. Number 9. The coin incident. At 7:30 p.m. on October 18, 1973, American Airlines Flight 21 encountered a UFO near Mansfield, Ohio, and reported it. This would be the first of dozens of sightings reported in the area that night. However, the most astonishing one took place 3 hours later and became known as the coin incident. Sometime after 10:30 p.m., an Army Reserve helicopter piloted by Captain Lawrence Coyne and a crew of 3 men was flying from Columbus to Cleveland when, somewhere around Mansfield, they noticed a red light on the horizon. They then realized that the object was heading straight for them at a high rate of speed. Coyne quickly descended to avoid collision, but as the men were preparing for impact, the object came to a halt in front of them and projected a green, pyramid-shaped beam over the helicopter. At the same time this was happening, the men reported the helicopter being pulled up and towards the UFO. However, it then let go and darted out of sight. The incident lasted 5 minutes. The men described a gray, metallic-looking dome-shaped object with a red light on one end and white light on the other. Now, interestingly, after the incident, according to one crew member, the helicopter never worked right again. Now, this whole incident was seen from the ground by a mother and her 2 children who pulled their car over to watch what was going on. They reported seeing the helicopter chasing an object that they said looked like limp, pear-shaped, and as big as a school bus. Number 8. Earliest photographs. A photo taken in St. Paris, Champaign County in 1932 is considered one of the earliest possible photographs of a UFO ever recorded. It shows George Sutton, a local resident, and what appears to be a classic UFO-shaped object over his left shoulder. Skeptics say the object is simply a street lamp, but according to the folklore that surrounds this image, there were no electric streetlights along this road in 1932, nor are any wires or poles visible in the image. Now, this photo is intriguing because it predates the flying saucer craze of the late 1940s and 50s. It was taken before the alleged Roswell UFO crash in 1947, and it was 6 years prior to the broadcast of the War of the Worlds in 1938, when some people believed aliens were attacking Earth. In other words, the person who took this photograph either captured a street lamp, a real UFO, or was way ahead of the curve in terms of pulling off a good hoax. But I'd like to think it's a real UFO. Number 7. The Carnival.
As a way to raise money, Father Gregory Miller decided to host a carnival in August of 1949. The church sought help from Sergeant Donald R. Berger, and on the first night of the carnival, sometime after 8 p.m., he was operating the searchlight when it came upon a massive object in the sky. His log states the object was stationary, appearing as a glowing disc. When I moved the searchlight away, the disc continued to glow. He estimated the object to be around 25,000 feet high and reported that the sky was clear with a thin haze at altitude. More than 100 people saw the object that night, including Father Miller. Maybe nothing more would have come from this incident, but the next day, local newspapers carried stories about strange lights being reported all over Cincinnati, not just at the carnival. At least 3 major newspapers in the area ran stories about the sightings, so it definitely was something. Number 6. 86-mile police chase. In Portage Country in 1966, law enforcement officers from several jurisdictions either witnessed or chased a UFO for 86 miles into Pennsylvania. The incident is considered one of the most thoroughly documented UFO cases on record. Portage County Sheriff Deputy Dale Spar and Second Deputy named Wilbur Neff came upon the UFO around 5:30 a.m. on April 17th. They were investigating an abandoned vehicle and they heard a humming or buzzing noise behind them, and they turned to see a UFO hovering just above a nearby tree line. A bright cone-shaped light came from beneath the object, illuminating the ground. They called into dispatch, which told them to keep an eye on the object. Just then, the object began to quickly move away. The two decided to give chase, and near the state line, a local police officer saw the object, followed by Spar and Neff chasing it. He decided to join in on the action. However, a short time later, just as the sun was rising, Spar began to run out of gas, so he and Neff and the local police officer pulled into a gas station, where they watched the object ascend several thousand feet into the sky and then straight into outer space, and, well, that was that. Number 5. October 11th, 1973. October 11th was quite the night for Ohio residents, as there were many UFOs spotted. In Dayton, at least 15 sightings were reported. Many witnesses reported seeing objects covered with red, green, and blue lights hovering over treetops in the area. A Montgomery County Sheriff's deputy reported seeing an oblong object covered with lights that appeared stationary in the sky at treetop level for several minutes until he tried to shine his cruiser's spotlight on it. It then zoomed towards him and then shot straight up in the sky. Then in Troy, according to an article in the Columbus Dispatch from October 12, 1973, titled UFO Reports Proceed Boom, on October 11th, Troy patrolman Early Thomas and about 100 Troy residents said they watched a hovering red, green, and white object move across the southeastern sky. Now, just to note, this happens to be the direction of Wright-Patterson. About 15 minutes later, law enforcement agencies in Miami, Champaign, and Logan counties received hundreds of telephone calls after a sonic boom was heard. They received more calls when a second sonic boom was heard just after midnight, and it seems like the aliens had something special planned for that day to me. Number 4. Trumbull County UFO Incident. Featured on the History Channel and numerous UFO documentaries, the Trumbull County UFO incident in northeast Ohio is exceptional because it was witnessed by numerous police officers and a 911 dispatcher, all of whom were being recorded as they spoke back and forth about the strange events unfolding the evening of December 14th, 1994. It was also seen by many members of the public as well. Now, around midnight, Trumbull County 911 began receiving calls from residents about strange low-flying lights in the sky. The dispatcher sent out Liberty Townsend police officers to investigate. One of them was Sergeant Toby Melrose, who saw a light. He got out of his car and looked up to see what he described as a giant circular-shaped object and intensely bright in the center section. It made no sound at all. The object was there for about 30 seconds before moving away. Shaken, Sergeant Melrose decided to chase the object, as did many other police officers in the area. At least 14 law enforcement officers saw the object that night, with all of them discussing it openly on their radios. Number 3. 1973. There were many UFO sightings in 1973 in Ohio and its surrounding states. For example, in Columbus on September 30th, a Franklin County man claims to have discovered a landing site near his home after seeing a strange object in the sky. Weeds at the alleged site are crushed to the ground in a semi-oval area 20 by 30 feet wide. The man says the object whooped down in a zigzag pattern and and drop below the trees. There are several dozen sightings of strange objects in the sky reported in the area that night. Then in Middletown on October 7th, a giant orange-colored cigar-shaped object with 5 discs following it and making no sound is reported flying over the city at 10 p.m. Many people see it, and Wright-Patterson receives numerous calls. Now, these are just 2 examples of that year, but there are many, many more. Number 2. Circleville. On August 26, 2022, Pete Hartinger said UFOs were spotted in the area. An expert on the topic who has seen a UFO with his own eyes, Pete said several people reported seeing UFOs between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m., including a man who saw something in the sky as he was traveling on US 23 north of Circleville. He saw strange lights, and going on down, he saw some more strange lights. He knows some other people who saw them too, he said. The man said it wasn't right the way the lights were acting. The lights came down, hit the ground, and went back up, so forget about them being flares. Pete said the man, who wishes to remain anonymous, reported what he saw to the Roundtown UFO Society, a local group dedicated to studying these matters. Anybody who has seen strange, mysterious lights that have been in the sky, please let us know, he said. He said at least half a dozen people saw the lights. One person said they saw orange lights over the fairgrounds, he said, and another person said he saw some military aircraft coming in after he saw those lights. Were they coming in to investigate, or what? Since 1947, there have been several sightings of UFOs in the Circleville area, which is strange. And coming in at number 1 is Ohio is a beacon. According to the Mutual UFO Network of Ohio, MUFON, the state ranks among the top 10 states in UFO reports. Thomas Wortman with the MUFON said, "It's all sorts of things we get. We get the individual who is out walking their dog at night who reports seeing unusual lights that they just can't explain. They see the lights for a few seconds or minutes and they just want an answer." Now, the majority of these reports come from Northeast Ohio, and Thomas says about 80% of what comes in the agency can be explained, but about 20% and up being classified as UFOs. Now, if you're waiting for the government to admit that aliens do exist, don't hold your breath, because the Time reports that the Pentagon isn't going to say that. But my question is, what is so special about Ohio?